Stella Silver, Roy Silver's mother. And I've been coming to Seedtime and Apple Shop ever since he came to Cumberland. And I find it very interesting and very in everything that they do. As a matter of fact, there was one year that Roy sent me tickets for South of the Mountain, which was appearing in New York, and took a friend of mine, and she was just enthralled by the play. And when I tell friends what Apple Shop does for young people, to teach them how to work in radio and television, they're utterly amazed because they think the mountains are just in another world.
My name's Rich Kirby. I was raised in an eastern Kentucky family that moved out of the region actually before I was born, and I was raised a lot up north. But in the 60s, hearing the things that were going on around here, I decided I wanted to go here. In an odd way, it felt like coming home, even though I had never really spent any time in this region. Ended up in Whitesburg in 1968, working on a project under the direction of Harry Caudle, and came here to live permanently in 1969. Worked with Maxine and Steve and Jim and some of the other people that you've already met. Played music and told stories with Mike Klein, Tom Bledsoe, and some other folks. A few years ago I decided it was time to get a honest job, but instead I ended up working for Apple Shop. I've been here since the last 6 years or so, working for the radio station.
My name is Jim Sessions, and I'm from the Highlander Center in Newmarket, Tennessee. I'm here because I'm lucky to be here, and it doesn't always work out that I get to be where I want to be, and this is where I want to be. And I'm really pleased I get to follow Guy and Candy around and learn from them a lot, and also kind of want to bring to y'all the real pride that the Highlander staff and board and family and friends have in them and their work and the work that this book represents, and even more especially the struggles of the people reflected in that book. It's a snapshot of really incredible historical significance for us to honor but to learn from. And the other reason is to be here to learn from all of you about where it's at today in this region, and I really look forward to the conversation.
We're not really recording anything, so don't worry about it.
We're broadcasting it.
I can take this away from you if you feel comfortable. I'm sorry.
That's okay. I'm Vanessa Johnson, and I live in Pike County. I'm the daughter of returned out migrants. My parents left Pike County in '59, went up north to work, had 3 daughters. And they brought us back home in '69. Even though we hadn't lived here, it was always home to us. And it was real important to me when I was younger to try to sound like my neighbors. I wanted to be from Kentucky. That was important to me. And it still is.
I'm Betty Boyd from Floyd County. I was born and raised there. Never lived away, so didn't go nowhere, didn't return. Have had a long struggle with not being able to have a voice, and found a way to do that through Kentuckians for the Commonwealth a couple years back. Have been real active with them. I'm now an employee of theirs and working on welfare rights. It's been a struggle. I'm one of those people that was on welfare that was no good, but I really want to see people in the mountains have a voice, and I want to encourage them to use that voice. I think we've been told so long that we are not supposed to speak up, and we're backward hillbillies, that it's kind of sunk in, and it needs to be removed, and I think I've found a way to do that. So, and I'm here to get some wisdom from all you people who have worked really hard before, and during hard struggles, because we got a big one on hand right now, so.
Sounds like there's no turning back for you.
It's a fact.
I'm Carrie Klein, and I've been so excited to come here. I've kind of been a fan, really an admirer of Apple Shop for as long as I was conscious of there being Southern Mountains, and I wasn't raised in this region, but the first time I made my way down to the Folk Life Center in West Virginia, Don West Center, I returned home for a visit, and my father had this book called Voices from the Mountains, and I pored over it for weeks, just read every word and tried to look inside the pictures, and I've just been so excited to come. I feel like I'm in some ways a child in the midst of veterans, because I think the war on poverty was a war from the few stories I've heard. And I feel a great deal of reverence for all of you.
Well, if you could have just one book about this region, think about all the stacks of them that have been written over the past 15 or 20 or 25 years. If you could have just one book of the region, I think this would be it. Because it looks from a cultural perspective at the lives of people and the struggles of people. And it's an invitation for us to take up cultural work, which can strengthen what we try to do as organizers and as good neighbors, as people trying to get together with one another to effect social change. And I'd like to turn to Gurney Norman now and ask Gurney if he would, in his wonderful way he does things, if he would kind of intone this meeting for us, if he would set a tone for the meeting and possibly review this book and what it's meant to you and what it's meant to your work.
Well, I think that Candy set the tone actually a few minutes ago when she said that she was especially interested in seeing how our meeting here today could be relevant to the times that we're presently in. And it's been mentioned that the issues and the struggles that people in this mountain region engaged in the 1960s and the 1970s basically continue, and that that work has not been completed by any means. And so I think that as we go along here, maybe for an hour or two, that we might have in mind that is a set of ideas to arrive at as we go along, as a point of discussion, I mean, before we're done. But I do think that it is a lot of fun and that it is useful and instructive for us to use this occasion, this very special gathering, and the fact that we have this new edition of Voices from the Mountains to help us to look backward in time across about 3 decades at least. I was born in Perry County, or in Grundy, Virginia, and grew up in Perry County from 1937 on. And my dad was an underground coal miner for Columbus Mining Company at Allays next to Hazard. And among my mother's people, all the men were miners. And so as a little kid, I was around coal and coal mining a whole lot. by the middle 1950s, as a high school senior, I had become conscious of the beauty of these mountains where we live, and also some of the difficulties of life here. And so I knew that when I was set out to go to college, that I wanted to get into journalism. And later I've gotten into other kinds of writing. But so I got some training and wanted nothing more than to come back to my hometown in Hazard, Kentucky, to report the news and to also to write feature stories and editorials. And so I would like to just have us look at a little bit of a time frame, and others may want to expand this frame or add to it or correct me if I get much of it wrong. But if we think about 1959 and the big United Mine Workers strike that was undertaken in these mountains, and remember that Governor Chandler of Kentucky called out the National Guard to put a limit on that strike and to contain it. To me, this is a watershed moment. It was the last truly massive UMWA strike that I think of here in eastern Kentucky. There have been many other strikes, of course. And then if we go forward to a few years and remember that it was 1963 that Harry Caudle's book, Night Comes to the Cumberlands, was published. And this book told a story to a very wide audience, and it caught the attention of officials in the federal government. And at the same time, a book called The Other America, Michael Harrington, isn't that book? This came out about the same time as Night Comes to the Cumberlands, and these two books exposed the fact that a huge portion of the American people were impoverished and struggling, and that they were disenfranchised, and that these insights from those two books, of course, coincided with all the great speeches and the great public testimony that was coming from the civil rights movement. And these things were coming to a head then in the early 60s. And here locally, we could just quickly cite the fact of the roving pickets movement from 62 to 65. I well remember as a young reporter for the Hazard newspaper when a group of citizens from over on Clear Creek in Knott County just rose up one day when a big bank of mud came down from a strip mine and just washed over some houses and created great devastation, and sort of struck a spark of outrage, and there came into being a group called the Appalachian Group to Save the Land and the People. Before that, there was a group of unemployed people around our immediate area here called the Appalachian Committee for Full Employment, which in a way was a kind of an outgrowth of the roving pickets movement. And so to me, though, 1965 is a special moment because it is when the Appalachian Committee for Full Employment and the Appalachian Group to Save the Land and the People were working and organizing and trying to affect social change, as we say, at the same time. And then from there, this coincides with the arrival in the region of the Vista Volunteers, the Appalachian Volunteers, and I won't go into a whole litany. I just wanted to sort of draw the attention to this time period. And it was about 1967. Candy, am I right that you all came to this region? 67?
We went to live in Pike County in 67, yeah.
Okay, see, 1967 is when two musicians and wonderful organizers, Guy and Candy Carawan, came into the midst of this volatile situation, and
Ernie?
what?
This is relevant. At the time we came, Michael Klein had been around the region quite a bit with the Appalachian Volunteers. He loved the old songs, he loved the new ones, he loved the songs that were about, that showed all the problems of strip mining and black lung, and he introduced us to about half the people in that book. So that book would have probably never came to be if we hadn't met Mike and he showed us around for the first year. And I would say, and then the other half of that is the book would never got out if you hadn't seen it and sent us to publishers that you knew and realized it's important. So we were very lucky. But thank you, Mike and Ernie.
Okay then, guys. I want Mike, but he was experiencing at this very time. I'm rapidly ending my testimony here, but maybe not quite so rapidly, but rapidly enough to suit summer. But what I think happened when Guy and Candy came to the mountains is they were experienced as collectors and understood bookmaking. And I don't know that they had in mind that a book would come from their works. I rather doubt it.
I think you're wrong there. We've been through 7 years of the civil rights movement at Highlander from 59 to 68, and we'd already put out 2 books. The songs of the sit-ins, the freedom rides, the voter registration drive, so it was real obvious. Miles' wife, Zilphy, had collected all the labor songs, so we were totally aware that this stuff was going to be coming.
Exactly, but see, that's my whole point, is that 67 was the time when a whole vital expression of many people was going on, but it had a constellation when you folks came. I mean, I know that a lot of music was being made and a lot of art was being produced and political organizing going on. But I just remember that this focal point came into being, and then 2 years later, Apple Shop was founded in 1969, and which means that in 2 years from now, Apple Shop will be celebrating its 30th anniversary. So I remember by 68, I was living in California, where I remained a number of years, but I was coming home very often because this was home, and it was so exciting here. And so the fact that Apple Shop was here as a center for creativity and for communication was very important to me, and many of us today have testified to that already. And Highlander also, which had been there 50 years or going on, was a place that I began to come quite regularly. And then I should just end by saying that in 1973, I came just on a visit with Lee Swenson. We came through, and that evening, Guy and Candy took me over to the library where the loose pages of this unpublished book, it was just in process of being created, they showed them to me, and I saw instantly that it was great and that there was nothing like it. And so I was able to suggest a couple places in New York to go to present the book, and I was not a bit surprised when Albert Knopf Press, I think that's the first publisher, snapped it right up. And then the book went out of print at a certain point, and the University of Illinois brought it back into print for a while. This book goes in and out of print, and I think for myself personally, one of the most important things that we can do today is to truly put attention on this book and have a commitment to keeping it in print. What better Christmas gift could any of us buy for anybody that we love? So I have that attitude toward it, and want to think in practical ways, because I agree with Mike. I think of all the books that have come from this region, about this region, addressing national and indeed global social questions, that this one is the best and the most essential. And I like Darlene's use of the term, the vernacular history. I'm totally honored to have a little piece of writing in here and a ballad in here and so on. But I also know that a book is serving us when it leads us back to the real world, back to work to be done, practical application to serious work in the community. So between talking about this book and talking about the issues and times surrounding the book, maybe that's the tone I'd set, if that is suitable.
Well, would you mind reading to us from, because I just love the piece that you have in here on page 63.
Well,
Or maybe there's one you'd prefer to read.
this little piece, oh yeah, okay, it's short enough. I guess you're going to get lots of folks to read some pieces here
I hope
today.
so, yeah.
It's, and who's brought a string instrument that might play for us after a while? I hope some singing comes out of this book today. Okay, Mike asked me to read this short page here that comes from this novel I wrote one time. And this chapter is called A Recollection. I'll let it speak for itself. That car of Daddy's was an old Pontiac he bought with the first wages he ever earned in Cincinnati. It had over 100,000 miles on it when he got it, but he never hesitated to take off in it for Kentucky. The first year we lived up there, we never missed a weekend going home. 52 round trips in a year, over 200 miles each way, 6, 7, sometimes 8 people in it every run. Every Friday, as soon as Daddy would get home from work, we'd load up and head out and drive 6 straight hours south on old US 25, through Lexington and Richmond, east into the hills on 421, then down State Route 666 to the home place in Findlay County. In the wintertime, it would be dark before we even set out, but in the summers, the light would hold till almost Richmond. And I remember the programs that came on the radio about that time of day. My daddy played the guitar some, and he loved hillbilly music. And so at 6 o'clock, he'd tune in the Hillbilly Hit Parade out of WCKY in Cincinnati. I remember it started and ended with somebody's fierce picking of the steel guitar rag. And then when it was over, Wayne Rainey and Lonnie Glosson would come on, trying to sell harmonica instruction courses. Wayne and Lonnie were good musicians too, and when they'd get wound up, Daddy would get excited and start to sing along with them and bounce around in his seat and beat on the steering wheel with his hand. He'd cut up like that for miles and miles. He'd tickle us all so much we'd forget how uncomfortable we were, piled on top of one another in the back seat of that old car. On Fridays, you wouldn't mind being uncomfortable because you knew you were on your way to someplace you really wanted to be. But on Sundays, you'd feel so blue about having to leave the home place to go back to Cincinnati. There wasn't any way in the world to get comfortable, and Daddy would have to stop every hour or so and let people out to stretch. We hated it coming back, but then it was only 5 more days till we'd go down home again, and we cheered ourselves up with that thought.
I'd like to break in here just a minute. You know, I was one of those out migration, job hunting, seeking people during the war. I read Gurney for another time or two. And there's a guy in the store, and he told me that this old hillbilly died and went to heaven. He got up there, and St. Peter was showing him around. He said, "What do you think about this place?" Well, it said it meets my expectations. You got the golden streets and the trumpet, the music, and the angels. But he said, "What's that commotion over in that heavenly corner? Those people are hollering, are screaming." He said, "Go over and check them out." He went over and checked them out. He came back, he said, "You got them chained to the wall." He said, "They're hillbillies and they go home every weekend if I didn't chain them up." That's about as good a one. It hit me good.
What about that business though, Joe,
You know,
of people having to leave and having to go somewhere else? Can you talk about that a little bit?
yeah, I worked in Connecticut and I like the people in Connecticut, but I was in misery. All the time I worked there, I could think about the streams and the hills and 22 rifles and pretty girls and whiskey and honky tonks and it, you know, that disturbed anybody. But it was amazing to watch the buses come out of Cincinnati and Dayton, and I guess Willow Run plant maybe. But I was so far away they didn't have any buses, so I didn't get home as often as I'd like to. But you know, the people that left eastern Kentucky during those times, a lot of them didn't get back. And I watched the war in Vietnam I was against, and the bunker bases are being run over by Viet Cong. And if the people that here that's out migrated came back today, we couldn't handle them. And we're actually in a process now. You never quit, Mike. If it ain't strip mining, it's water pollution or legal systems of all kinds. Cleaning the river up. We're trying to do that. We're trying to get sewer lines to clean the river up. It's on the way. I think we're making some progress. I've been in this for 30 years. I've enjoyed every minute of it. But it's absolutely worn me out. I've got to where I can't, it's like a cobweb, it's confusing. And I've lost people, I've outlived them all, my family. And I've read about the Civil War back in the, wherever it was. We had that here in the 60s. You know, family against family, brother against brother, and all this destruction. And we didn't win them all, but we won a lot of them. I could name you 12 things. We didn't have any laws here to protect the people. And that was one of the things that we had to go to the legal system to get those laws to govern. And well, anybody could do anything. You could get a permit in Frankfurt to kill people, you know, back in the 50s and 60s. They were wanting the money, the greed. And that just didn't work here. I think we've come a long way. I appreciate Guy and Candy. I appreciate Miles Horton that's not been mentioned here at Highlander. I was at Highlander, I stayed 2 days and a half. I was going to stay 2 weeks and it got so bitter with Black Panthers. And I got a PhD degree in 2 days at Highlander. And I came home. But on the way home, I realized that I was running from the very thing that I should be staying with. But I made out good. But we've got a lot of laws now that we didn't have. I think people's far better off with doctors and nurses, with food stamps, with vouchers, with all of that. And I think that the government's going to have to. But my interest is, I'd like to see young people know their history. If they don't know where they've been, they're not likely to know where they're going. History repeats itself. They don't know Martin Luther King. They don't know John L. Lewis. And I think that's terrible. And it's all going to come back on us. I wonder if they're going to be prepared to fight it like we did. It was a terrible time. But I enjoyed it all. If I died in the next 5 minutes, as far as I'm concerned, I've raised my family. I've got a good family, and I've helped other families and other people. We've won some battles, we've lost some. But overall, it really looks good. I'm glad to be a survivor, to look at it all. I wish people were sure that was my age, people was gone, it was young people, and older people. That's hard for me to realize that, you know, I'm on death row, and I think anybody 60, 70, 80, 90 years old on death row, whether you know it or not. But I'm glad to be here. I appreciate God and Candy. They were the battles that we was all in.
You know, Joe, when Joe talks about young people knowing this history. I mean, I think it's really important that people who have been part of organized struggles talk about it and tell about it, because how are young people to know that people can make a difference if they organize, if they get together and work together on a problem? And I think it's really our responsibility, and you've done your part in this, but I guess I'm talking to everybody in the room, we have to teach that it's possible to change if you organize and work together.
Candy, this was not the first book that you all had produced. You had done some amazing books before ever you came here. I love the one about Ain't You Got a Right to the Tree of Life, and Been in the Storm